Without the cross, there's no blood. Without the blood, there's no salvation. But without the resurrection and conquering hell, death, and the grave, then there's no price there was no conquering. Okay, so it really is what sets Christianity apart is what happened that we recognize this weekend. I'm going to look at three different people. Three different people that encountered Jesus over this time period that we're talking about right now. The first one was a stranger. The second one was a disciple. And the third one was a woman. And their lives changed on this week many, many years ago. Okay? Mark chapter number 15, starting at the 21st verse. It says, then they compelled a certain man, Simon, a Cyrenian, the father of Alexander and Rufus, as he was coming out of the country and passing by to bear his cross. And they brought him to the place Golgotha, which is translated place of the skull. You know, when I read this, it brought me back to my days in Louisiana. When we moved to Louisiana, there was a few of us that moved down there, and people were buying houses. And I'll never forget, Pastor Teresa's dad was buying a house, and he was looking for a real estate agent. And he found a real estate agent whose name was Rufus. And he literally used Rufus because of his name. And that guy ended up selling like 7 or 8 houses and got the real estate agent of the year that year. All because his name was Rufus. But here you've got Simon. He's the father of Alexander and Rufus. Okay, and it said that he was basically in town and he was coming through, and Jesus is coming across. He didn't really know what was going on, and Jesus is being paraded through, and he's carrying his cross, and they grabbed him and they made him a part of the resurrection weekend, a part of what was happening. He had to bear the cross for Jesus, because you see, you have to understand, Jesus was so abused and beat up before he ever got on that cross. He was torn to shreds. He was mutilated, the Bible says, and I believe it's in Isaiah, that he was beyond recognition before he ever got up on that cross. And so he was unable to carry the cross, and they took Simon and they said, we want you to carry that cross for him. It says in Luke 23, verse number 26. Now, as they led him away, they laid hold of a certain man, Simon, a Cyrenian, same story, who was coming from the country, and on him they laid the cross that he might bear it after Jesus. So imagine if you're Simon. You're coming into the big city. You're coming from the country. You've got your kids with you, and you're walking along, and you're thinking, what is this commotion that is going on? What in the world is happening? He goes just like all we do, right? If there's an accident, what does everybody do? They go see what's going on. And so he's going and he's wondering what's going on. And when he sees the crosses that are going by, and he sees the thieves and he sees Jesus, all of a sudden Jesus falls down. They grab him and they said, you pick up the cross. So here's Simon. It didn't matter what he wanted in that moment. He had his sons with him. We don't know how old the sons were. But it didn't matter that he had to watch them. It didn't matter that the cross was full of blood that was dripping from Jesus. When a Roman soldier grabbed them in those days and said, do this, you had to do it, or they just run you through with a sword and grab somebody else. And that day, this man's life changed because of an encounter he had with the cross and with Jesus. See, when your life intersects the cross, it's an interruption. Christianity is not going to church. Christians go to church, but Christianity is not going to church. There's a divine interruption that takes place when we give our lives to Jesus. Before I gave my life to the Lord, I had my plans. How many in here, you had plans? I was fresh out of college. I had all these designs and things that I wanted to do and what I wanted to accomplish. And I had designed inside how I was going to do it. I always wanted to get into real estate even back then. And I'm going to do this. And I graduated college. I was doing carpentry type work. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this and this and this. And by the time I'm 25 years old, I'm going to have this. And I had everything planned out that I was going to do. And one day, I went and I visited my brother, and I was intersected with the cross. That the message of Jesus Christ was presented to me in such a way, just give me a good crowbar, a good long straight bar, and I could roll that puppy away. But reality is when you look at the translation, it was very large. It means it was actually huge. It was really, really giant. It doesn't, sometimes when the word is translated into English, we lose the meaning of it. The Bible says that it was huge, that it was unable to be moved by one person. And so when you get into it, it talks about that an angel had come down. In another version, it said that an angel had come down and moved it and sat upon the stone. So that thing was so big that no one could move it, and yet one angel. Understand, there's a supernatural world. And that supernatural world is more real even than this world that we're a part of. And that angel came down and moved that stone, and the Bible says he sat upon it, and they saw him that he sat on it. He was so big he could sit on it like it was a stool. He moved that stone out of the way. So anyway, back to our story. Verse number 5. And entering the tomb, they saw a young man clothed in a long white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. But he said to them, do not be ashamed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He is risen. He's not here. See the place where he was laid. And then in verse number 7 it says, go tell his disciples and Peter. Go tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you into Galilee, and that you will see him as he said to you. Peter, like I said, he would walk around all the time with his foot in his mouth because he loved God so much he was willing to be clumsy doing it. And he would make mistakes. And he told Jesus, I'm willing to die for you. And Jesus said to him, you'll deny me 3 times. And I can imagine Peter thinking to himself, that's just not going to happen. And yet, that's exactly what happened. And when Jesus rose from the dead, the angel specifically said to the women that found him, I want you to go and tell all the disciples, but I want you to specifically tell Peter. See, Peter felt unworthy. He probably didn't consider himself a disciple at that time. Here's someone, he had followed Jesus for 3.5 years. He had done all the stuff that was there to do. But when push come to shove and Jesus needed him the most, he turned away. See, sometimes when we serve God, we're trying to. We've got one person who was a complete stranger to Jesus and his life changed that day. We got another person who knew Jesus for 3.5 years, who followed him and gave his life for him, but when it came right down to it, he turned his back on him. He denied Jesus 3 times. He not only denied him 3 times, he denied him 3 different ways. In Matthew 26, verses 69 and 70, the Bible says, now Peter sat outside the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him saying, you also were with Jesus of Galilee. But he denied it before them all, saying, I do not know what you are saying. He was defiant that he didn't know Jesus. There's some people that you're here that you've been defiant about the things of God. That when push come to shove and the pressure was on, you defiantly stood against him. You're not alone. Peter did the same thing. Defiance is an attitude. It's not just words. It's an inward emotion that says, I don't know him. I don't even know what you're talking about. Second one is he denied him contemptuously. Matthew 26, 71 and 72. And when they had gone out to the gateway, another girl saw him and said to those who were there, "This fellow also was with Jesus of Nazareth." But again he denied with an oath. He went a step further. "I do not know this man. I do not know this man." Contemptuously means in a scornful way that shows disdain. He was fearful for his life because Jesus was being put on trial. And when the girl said, this man knew him, he was so full of fear that he literally disdained it and he stood against it and he said, "I don't want anything to do with him. I don't know him." He was contemptuous. And the third one, Matthew 26, 73 and 74, and a little later, those who stood by came up and said to Peter, "Surely you also are one of them, for your speech betrays you." Then he began to curse and swear, saying, "I do not know the man." And immediately a rooster crowed. He blasphemed Jesus with his words. And Peter on that day, when that rooster crowed, the Bible says it crowed, and that's what Jesus told him was going to happen. And it says that he looked and he saw Jesus. Their eyes met. And Peter left very sorrowful. What that means is he left with a broken heart. What he said would never happen, that he had given his life, he had given everything that he had to serve Jesus, and all of a sudden he found himself in a place where he was cursing God. And he met Jesus' eyes. Not a word was spoken, but you know that sometimes when eyes are met, there's something that happens. That more can be said in that moment of meeting eyes that can be said with your words. And he left broken. He was a broken man because of the decisions that he had made that day. And yet something inside, Jesus said, the angel said, "Go and tell the disciples and Peter that when he was at his lowest and he was at his most broken, they made a way for him." See, some of you have blasphemed. Some of you have followed God and walked away. Some of you, you may never have known Jesus, but you've talked about it and you've turned aside and you've said, "I don't care about Jesus. I don't want to serve Jesus. I don't want anything to do with your God." But the beauty is, he doesn't throw us away. See, he was overcome with grief. In verse number 75, it says, "And Peter remembered the word of Jesus and said to him, 'Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. So he went away and he wept bitterly." In John chapter number 20, Jesus now is risen from the dead. It says, "Now the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene, she went to the tomb early and saw that it was dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. Then she ran and came to Simon Peter and the other disciples." Here you've got again, remember that in the other gospel, it said, "Go and tell the disciples and Peter." And then here it says that she went to Peter and the other disciples. She did exactly as she was told to do. She went to Peter.